What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show with me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com, and we are back with the top bets for the week in the world of mixed martial arts. And it is American-centric this weekend, as we have the PFL on May 1st in Florida, and in Des Moines, Iowa, we have on May 3rd the UFC on ESPN 67, which is the most UFC on FX 438 that type of thing. God. I kind of can't wait for this UFC deal to be up and see what we get after that. But anyway, we have some, two really good cards, to be honest. The PFL have had a great year so far. Obviously, last week with the UFC, we had a pretty good card as well. So, yeah, I actually really like this UFC card. I really like the PFL card. So, exciting weekend again. Like last weekend, obviously me being Irish, we had Ian Gary in the main event, and we had a big Cage Warriors card as well in Dublin. So it was all systems go. But yeah, there's no come down really this weekend because it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So before we get to next week, let's look at last week though. Again, a 50-50 week. We hit 2, we missed in 2. The Flier didn't hit as always. The Flier was Ian Gary by submission. Now, I got a part of it right, I suppose. I thought he'd be looking for takedowns, which he did, and he got them. But as Ian says in the aftermath, a lot of it was kind of to take the gas out of him to change things up. Didn't end up getting the submission, or not even really close to it. So look, it's a Flier plus 600. The other two that didn't hit, Mariusz Pudzianowski, Eddie Hall beat him, and I had that one completely wrong. I thought it should have been a bigger price, but Eddie Hall came out and he battered his way. Pudzianowski just a little bit too old. Although if they make the rematch, I'll absolutely watch it. And the other one that didn't hit was James Sheehan, minus 115. He was 3 rounds up with a 10-8. And then unfortunately, he got a broken jaw. Unfortunately for him and the betting people here. But credit to Justin Burlinson. The toughest man in Dublin that night, no doubt about it. And he got the win. So credit to him. But unfortunately, our bets didn't hit. The two that did hit, this Matthew Elliott price, I told you, was miles off, and it was. He ended up being minus 170, so I thought it actually would get bigger than that. We had it minus 150, so that's pretty good. Started a little bit shorter than that even, so if you got him last week at minus 150, that's a good price. And then Miang Zhang got the knockout at minus 200. Again, not the best price in the world, but look, a win's a win, and the two of those bets are as safe a bets as you'll ever get for prices that aren't ludicrously bad. So we'll those sort of ones, I don't necessarily like giving them. I think I won sort of like that, but not as bad this week. But if there's something I think this is definitely going to happen, I will give them, because I think there's value to be made in them. If there's someone, I just think he's going to win and he's minus 210 or something like that, unless I feel very, very strongly about it, I won't give it. So my record is important, but it's not as important, I think, as getting value and, having a good chat and having a good discussion about why we're betting on something, why it's good value and all of that. So I think the people who tune in every week kind of know that now. So that's the way we go. And please bet responsibly, as always. So the record is 33 from 68, just under the 50%. So we need to have we need to have a good week here soon, and still only hit one Flyer. I think it was Ben mentioned it on his show with Keith, the week Keith actually wasn't on, that the me not hitting Flyers is an ongoing joke, and I until he said it on that, I didn't realize it was it's an ongoing joke, to be honest, but it definitely is an ongoing joke. I'm the one making the joke every week, by the way, so it's not like someone's taking a piss out of me or anything. But yeah, the Flyers are not great. I kind of like my Flyer this week, but we'll see. We'll get to that. Right, I have 3 from PFL, 2 from UFC this week, and we're going to start off with the PFL. And I'll be honest with you, I was torn, and I'll tell you which bets. I was torn between 2 bets in the PFL, which ones to give you. One of them, I gave the pick. If you watch my PFL preview, and if you haven't, please do. I picked Phil Davis in that, and I think Phil Davis will win, but I'm not 100% sure. But I was tempted when I pick someone to win and they're plus 124. I'm like, I should probably give them in this. And the other one, there was a few I was looking at, but the other plus money bet that I picked and I'm not as sure of, but Sergey Bellastini even, a plus 145 against Valentin Moldavsky. Now, I'm at odds to pick against Moldavsky because he's a very, very good fighter. The reason I like Bellastini is because he performs so well in the PFL so far, and I think there's a real good heavyweight fighter in him, but he's against a real good heavyweight fighter as well. So against anyone else, I'd probably be taking that price, but I have ignored both of them. Those two bets that I just gave you are not my first bet. My I don't know why I did it, but anyway, my first bet is a double, and I'm going from Popov and Romanov both to win at minus 165. So again, not the best price here in the world. Actually, my straight up bets this week are not the best prices in the world, but they're all around the minus 150ish or less. But yeah, that's the first one, the double here. So if you haven't heard, Popov's opponent changed. I had it on the preview show. So if you, I talked about him versus Karl Williams. He's fighting Karl Williams now. He's supposed to fight Linton Vassell. And the other fight, Romanov, he's in an interesting fight against Tim Johnson. Why do I think? And both of them. I'll give you the straight up prices of both of them where they are right now. Romanov is best price minus 450, which is pretty good. If you get him at that good of a price, I think I think that might be irregular. So maybe my price I've given you here is a tad small, but that's the best price I see here. And on the other side, then Popov is minus 250 best price. Again, that's on one of the big books in the States. So I think that is that is kind of what you're going to get him at around about now. So again, I think that's a very, very low. I was tempted to give Popov straight up a minus 250. Look, I think he'll win that fight. I think Karl Williams, we spoke about it on the preview show, is probably an underrated guy. At 10-2, not a bad record at all, especially in the heavyweight division. He's never been knocked out in the heavyweight division either. He was on a good run in the UFC, won 3 in a row after winning the Contender Series. Only lost to Jonathan Deniz, who on his day, he's a very good technical fighter, is Deniz. Williams not a bad fighter at all, but I think the issue here with Popov will be how good Popov is kind of all around as a fighter. Like against Goltsov last year, I think he got caught against another guy who's a very well-rounded fighter, is used to the system, got the fight to the ground. He got him in a triangle choke, which is obviously very unusual in heavyweight. But Goltsov had been wrestling people last year, had been doing, he beat Vassell, beat Franklin, had beaten Steve Mowry as well, which is a top win. And before that, Gokhan Sakaram, I was actually at that fight as well, and he was, Sakaram's a big unit, and for him to beat him, that was a great win as well. And I just think Popov, is he the favorite to win it this year? It's tough to say anyone's the favorite, when you have a guy, I suppose, like Moldavsky. And again, I know he didn't get all the way last year, but I think he might be up there. And I think Karl Williams on short notice against a guy with those grappling abilities, and against the guy who was preparing for that date and knew about that date for a good while, it's going to be a real tough matchup. So I think Popov, I think he'll probably win a decision there. I think the wrestling might be enough. I think he's good from the outside as well, a good jab. And then the other side of it, I find it very hard not to see Alexander Romanov beating Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson came in last year and he was game, but he lost 2 fights after winning that Leon Marquez fight, obviously, which was an amazing outing for him. But Romanov, 34 years of age, he's not old for a heavyweight. He won his last fight in the UFC against Nascimento. He's beaten Belay Ivanov, Chase Sherman, and many more as well. He's a lot of submissions on his record. And I think against Tim Johnson, I think that might be the issue here. Like Tim taking a shot as well it has become an issue more so at the latter end of his career than it was in let's say his prime. But I think Romanov might be the type who will try to work on the wrestling aspect of this game, try to get Tim Johnson to the ground. Did I call him Tim Elliott before? I hope I didn't call him Tim Elliott. Try to get Tim Johnson to the ground and try to get one of those submissions. So I think it's a pretty straightforward run for Romanov. Not as straightforward for Popov, I would say, but I like the two of them. And that's the first bet, the double, minus 164, if I'm correct. Minus 165. Okay. Next bet I'm going for, and I've had a look with the Irish recently, so I'm going to go for the Irish bet again, and I'm going to go for Karl Moore at minus 130. Now, I was a tad surprised, although I agreed with it, to see Karl was the favourite, and nothing got to do with Karl, but considering how good Shoeface has been as a tournament fighter over the last few years, and how good he has been in the whole in the PFL. Like, he's only lost to Alex Polizzi, and okay, Karl Moore went in there and beat Alex Polizzi, so maybe that's kind of why this is bet on it. But at the same time, I was expecting it to be relatively close. I myself have over the betting odds, and maybe over some analysts, I have a real strong take on Karl Moore winning this fight. I think Karl has Karl is a guy with a very, very good BJJ background. He has lost once by submission in his career, but that was to Paul Craig. That was 10 years ago. These things happen in MMA. So other than that, he is the guy who is dominating a lot of guys on the ground. He's 5 submissions in his career, and he's 12 in his 12 wins. It's a pretty good percentage, especially for a heavyweight. Or a heavyweight / light heavyweight. Obviously, he fought in the heavyweight division before. And he's coming up against a guy here, and the reason I say that is because he's coming up against a guy here is such an amazing ground fighter. His submissions are amazing, 12 submissions and 16 wins for Cara de Zapato. But I think Karl has enough in his game to, I'll throw an A and B here, right? A, to not get taken down against Shoeface, and to keep the fight standing and to win the fight standing. Although Shoeface, again, he's never knocked anyone out in his career, but he has developed an effective enough striking game, I think, recently. Recently might be the wrong word there, but where he throws those big shots and causes a takedown to happen, or causes the fight to go to the ground. But if it does play out on the feet, and if Karl can force it to play out on the feet, which I think he has a very good chance of doing, because he's very good in that aspect of the game. I think he can win the fight on the feet, because he's, some of his jab and his hooking in his recent fights have been really good. Obviously, the Corey Anderson fight, he did so well in that fight. We know how good Corey Anderson is, how he has shown that over the years. And the B part of it then is, if the fight does manage to go to the ground, like a lot of lads go in there against Shoeface, they go to the ground and they're bet. You're getting submitted, you're getting dominated, you're in for a real tough night. I think Karl Moore is good enough to shut down that offense. Now, look, if it goes to the ground 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and Shoeface keeps getting in good positions for submissions, he can submit not just Karl Moore, he can submit anyone in the world. There's no doubt about that. He's an exceptional ground fighter. But if it does manage to go to the fight to the floor, let's say in the first 2 to 3 minutes, I think Karl Moore can defend, get back up, get to the striking. If it does it 2 to 3 to 4 times in the fight, I think he is good enough. Now, again, Shoeface can submit anyone, but I think Karl Moore is good enough in that position not to be one of these lads that panic and just get submitted. So, with all that said, I think it's a good enough matchup for Karl Moore to make me think that what price was again, minus 130 price is pretty good. So yeah, that's why I'm rolling in with this week is bet number 2, Karl Moore to beat Shoeface. Third bet, again, a bit of a bigger price, but this is one of the bets I was talking about earlier that I really have a strong opinion on him winning this fight, and this is Simeon Powell to beat Karl Albrechtsen, and his best price minus 172. Most prices he's not majorly far away from that. Look, the reason I'm giving you this is twofold. I think at 10-1 now, Powell has reached a stage in his career where this is the time that I'm supposed to kind of kick on. He started his career at 9-0, looked amazing, not fighting maybe the biggest names in the world, had a step up against Jacob Neto, whose name I pronounced right for the first time maybe ever, lost that fight in a fight that was relatively, I suppose, even at times coming up that Edo did take over, but then bounced back against Rafael Xavier, who's also on this card on the weekend, and looked very, very good in that, although it was one of those ones where it was a split decision. Xavier had his moments, but it was one you needed to get over. I remember talking about it at the time. You've got that W now. Let's kick on. Let's get the next guy. And the fact that the next guy is Karl Albrechtsen, a lad who has had 20 fights, who's won 14 of them, who has wins over the likes of Yashimuradov and Nimkov, has been in there with Moldavsky and Prohachka and Phil Davis and Karl Moore and Chuck Campbell, who's a very good guy on the scene. Most recently, this is the type of guy you need to get up for. And I think it's exactly what Simeon Powell needed right now. And I think he can win the fight. Like, Albrechtsen is a good, well-rounded fighter. Now, he has 10 wins inside the distance, 7 via knockout and 3 via submission. So he, as I said, dangerous everywhere. But Powell is the type that I think needs to bully Albrechtsen, right? And he needs... his training partner Luke Trainer. I was like, is that the right name? It is. He is very good at doing this, going out and bullying his opponents, and putting his game plan, like Ian Gary did for the first 3.5-4 rounds the last day. Put your game plan as what is happening in this fight, and I think that's what Powell has kind of failed to do maybe in the last 2 fights, but what he needs to do in this fight, and I think he can. I think he hits hard enough. I think he can wrestle. I don't think Albrechtsen will bring, the wrestling maybe that would threaten a guy like Powell when he gets into the... I'm not saying he has a weakness in his wrestling or anything. I actually don't think he does. I think he's very good takedown defense, which he showed in some of those PFL contender fights that he was in. But Albrechtsen will fight him on the feet, I think. And I think that will be very dangerous for Albrechtsen. It will put Powell under pressure, but I think he can rise to that occasion. Like, there was a lot of people talking about Powell as being, like the equivalent of Dakota Ditcheva. And we've seen what Ditcheva has done, and it hasn't gone the same way for Powell. But I still believe in him. I still think he's a very, very good fighter, and I still think he can turn this around and go on a run. Albrechtsen, again, a tough matchup, but I think Powell's power, his awareness of needing to be better will, kind of add up to the winning formula here for him in this one. So, like Simeon Powell, at minus 172 in this one, minus 172. Right, let's pop over to the UFC. I'm going to start with the main event first of all, and I'll be honest, I was shocked. Myself and my colleague Graham McDonald over on the Severe Met podcast were talking about the weekend, and he was telling me, are you shocked by the price in the main event? And I was like, oh, what is it like? I was thinking Sandhagen maybe. He said shocked, so I was thinking like maybe minus 350 or something. And when he told me minus 500, I was like, oh, goodness, I think he'll win, but minus 500 is an awful lot. In fact, I thought about giving Figueiredo a plus 380 as my flyer of the week, but I haven't. I've gone a little bit more conservatively here, and I'm going to go for Sandhagen to win via decision at minus 139. Now, that is where I found the value in this fight, and I'll tell you for why. So if you look at it here, you look at the fight to go to decision itself, minus 200. Which in itself I don't think is a bad bet. I kind of thought about that, but I was also thinking if the fight does go to a decision, who is winning it? And I think the most likely guy to win the fight, if it does go to decision, is Sandhagen. And now that's despite maybe Figueiredo winning a lot of decisions, although they're very close. 6-2 and 1 Figueiredo is in decisions. 7-4 Sandhagen is in decisions. So, they both, is it 11 for Sandhagen? He's won 7, 9 for Daiho, and he has won 6 of them. So, pretty similar type of percentage there. The difference, I think, though, is Figueiredo, since he's gone up to 135, he's good wins. He beat Cheeto, he beat Cody Garbrandt, Rob Font. Was it Cody won at 35 or 25? It doesn't matter anyway, but he's won a couple. But against Yan, I think it showed the issues he's going to find in that division, right? Over 5 rounds, and he put on a good fight in that, but I think the cardio is going to be the biggest plus for him. I think his length is going to be an issue. Now, he's 5'5", Cory Sandhagen's 5'11". That's going to be a big issue in all fights for Figueiredo at 135, most fights. But against Sandhagen, that is just going to be a big issue. And I think Sandhagen is the type of guy who knows against Figueiredo, and this is the reason why I'm picking the fight to go to decision. If you go too risky against Figueiredo, let's say, he throws a lot of flying knees, and he will throw bits and pieces out of them. Figueiredo is the type of guy that, and he hasn't done this recently, but he is the type of guy who will get you into a fight that you initiated in terms of a semi-war, let's put it that way, and beat you there. We saw it against, was it Joseph Benavidez famous? We saw it in that fight. That's the type of fight I'm talking about. I think Sandhagen is smart enough not to do that. I think he's smart enough to use that lint. I think he's smart enough to kick from the outside, get a few takedowns. Look, we've seen him. What was the fight where he was booed out the door? Was it the Cheeto fight that turned into a split decision? I think that's the sort of fight, not necessarily that fight where it's just wrestling, but I think we're going to have a longer, more drawn out fight here, and I think the fight is going to decision. Again, I was telling you about the odds. Sandhagen to win by knockout plus 420, pretty high. Figueiredo knockout plus 1300. Sandhagen submission plus 700. Figueiredo submission plus 1500. So all of those finishing props are very, very high prices. And I said the fight to go decision minus 200, minus 205 around there as well. Here's what I'm just gonna throw out there: a mad flyer. I feel like Sandhagen and Figueiredo. I'd like to get the stats on this, but I don't know why. But I feel like when I think of him, sometimes I think a point's been taken. Could this be a draw? Fight to be a draw, plus 5,000. Sandhagen and Figueiredo a draw. Maybe a flyer upon flyer bets there. But no, I do like the fight to go to a decision. I think Sandhagen will win that decision. And I think it's a pretty good price at minus 139 for a guy who is an outside minus 500 bet. An onside, you would say, maybe minus 500 bet. So that's the one I'm going for here. Right. The flyer of the week. This is an interesting flyer. I thought about this deeply before I gave it, and I'll explain it in a while. But first of all, I'm going for Bo Nickal via submission at plus 525, which is pretty big price there, considering. And okay, we'll get the he's fighting over the Ritter, but Bo Nickal has fought 7 times. He's won 4 of them by submission. He beat Cody Brundage by submission. Beat Jamie Pickett in the UFC by submission, won both of his Contender Series fights by submission as well. Now, he obviously has been striking more recently, and look, he Paul Craig last time out. It's unlikely you're going to submit Paul Craig. But I think it's an interesting one in this one against Renier the Ritter. The Ritter obviously is very, very good on the ground as well. Some people might say this is a similar fight to the Paul Craig fight in that you're fighting kind of a submission artist, but I watched most of his fights, or all of his fights, over in One Championship, and he has gotten a lot of submissions. But he's also the type of guy we saw it against Antonio Malikan in those 2 fights. Now Malikan obviously a much bigger guy at different weight classes, whatever they are, over One Championship than Bo Nickal, and he didn't get submitted in either of those fights, but he did kind of back up at a rate of knots. He did get finished in a way that if it was a submission artist, you could have seen him getting knocked down, the back taken, and him getting choked out type of thing. And if that was to happen again against Bo Nickal, that's kind of what Bo does. We've seen him knock lads down, hurt them badly, and then choke them out. It felt like that was the Bo Nickal finish there for a while, remember, in the Contender Series and all. I could very well see that happen. Now, again, I'll say this is a flyer, right? And this is predicated on Bo Nickal doing that. Bo Nickal having the better of it. Bo Nickal maybe hurting him and then jumping on a submission, or Nickal taking him down, dominating him on the ground and submitting him. maybe the fight doesn't play out that way. Again, this is a Flier bet at your own peril here. Will the fight be closer? Like, if we were to, if we ever just got, and this is not the place maybe for that, will the Ritter show him things maybe that he hasn't seen before? I don't think so, to be honest. Like, the Ritter is a good, well-rounded fighter. More of, again, a lot of submissions in his record. What was the record again? 19 wins, 13 by submission. That's an awful lot. He's 4 knockouts in there as well, which is pretty good. Only got the decision twice. And he's never lost by decision either, so he's 2 losses via knockout. I just wonder if Bo Nickal is this special guy that everyone's talking about. How is he going to make it special? And what went through my mind when I was kind of breaking all this down, and if I was going to give this pick, there's a touch in Bo Nickal, in my opinion, and maybe we didn't necessarily see it against Paul Craig. And he said afterwards, I would have been stupid to do against Paul Craig. But do you remember what John Jones was known for years ago? Now, the OGs might remember this more than the McGregor crew or whoever it is that came in the last few years. But John Jones used to be known for beating guys at their own game. And I wonder, after the Paul Craig fight, after the tiny bit of backlash, I suppose, he had for the performance of that, will Bo Nickal try to beat the Ritter at his own game? If he does, that plus 525 bet is very, very tasty. Very tasty altogether. So let's see if that happens. So those are the 5 bets for the week. Let's see, is there anything else on either of those cards that whets the appetite? One bet I was very close to giving, and I really like this bet. It has moved in the last couple of days, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check here. Indeed it has. Let me just check the right one now. But Santiago Ponzinibbio. He started out, he was actually plus money, plus 105, and it's moved out to minus 125 now. Some places minus 129. And I don't know, that put me off a tad. If you give me that at plus money against Daniel Rodriguez, I would have taken it. I think Rodriguez is kind of on the outs at the moment in terms of where he's going in his career. I look, Ponzinibbio isn't exactly in his prime either, but I like Ponzinibbio at that price. So yeah, that's one I would jump at. There's a couple of favorites there. Surrey City, I like him. He's only a small favorite, but I like him there. I like Montel Jackson as well. I like Mason Jones, but Mason Jones is minus 575. I wouldn't look past Jones by submission at plus 410. He mightn't have a whole load in his career, but he can fight on the ground, and Jeremy Stevens is a tough out on the feet, so that's not a bad bet there, I don't think. Tate and Santos, again, I was very close to giving Santos here, like, how much is Tate in the game? Where is she at the moment? Santos is no great shake. She's not a great fighter at all, but plus 122 on Santos, that's probably what I would be looking at there. I like Jillian Robertson. I think she's had a good run. Not the best price in the world, minus 320, obviously there. Peterson, a big favorite against Mays. And I'll always take the underdog in a heavyweight fight like that. So give me Mays in that one. And then Petrovic and Juliana Minner, interesting one as well. Petrovic, a big favorite there. She'll probably take that. In the PFL, so we'll just run through all of them quickly here, and I'll give you my pick for all of them. So we have Popov, obviously minus 250. He's the pick there against Williams. I'm going to go Davis again. Again, I'm not massively certain, but plus 124. I like him there. Again, Moldavsky, Bilastini. We talked about it at the start, but I find it hard to ignore that plus 145 in Bilastini. Like Karl Moore, plus 130, obviously, as we saw. Like Simeon Powell, like Romanov. And then in the other fights that we didn't speak about, Collier minus 160. I think that's a great bet. I like Babley at plus money, plus 105. I see him here. He's even money in a couple of places. I like him against Nascimento. Nascimento is the guy with all the experience, but Babley, he lost his last fight, but it was to Slim Trebelsi, who is a very, very, very good fighter. I like Babley in that fight. And then Polizzi and Xavier, like Xavier has caused updates before at plus 195. I might go for it at that price, or if it was a little higher. If it goes over the plus 200, I might go for Xavier, but I do think Polizzi is probably the bet there. So there you go, everybody. That is the betting show for this week. Let's just recap our 5 bets. So the first bet is a double of Popov and Romanov at minus 165, minus 130 Karl Moore. Bet number 2. Bet number 3 is Simeon Powell at minus 172, minus 139 then for Sandhagen to win by decision. And the flyer of the week is your guy, Keith Shillian's guy, Nickal to win by submission at plus 525. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please bet responsibly. Please tell a friend. Please subscribe. And if you can share the show, that'd be absolutely amazing as well. But until then, until next week, my name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.